The Suicide Squad is officially out, and today I'm going to be ranking every film in the DC Extended Universe, otherwise known as the DCEU. The DCEU has not been as successful as the MCU because it has not planned out everything as well. However, there are still some really solid films in this franchise. That being said, there are also some duds. Spoilers are also in order for all of these films, so you have been warned. Remember, this is just my opinion. It's totally okay to disagree, and we shall get into the ranking of all DCEU films right now. Justice League, or Justice League, as I like to call it, is one of the worst comic book movies I have ever seen. Not just because the film is terrible, but the story of how this film was made is even worse. The worst thing about this movie is there is no clear vision from the director, and that's because there were two of them here with Joss Whedon and Zack Snyder. Those two directors have completely different visions and directing styles, so this movie just ended up being a mess. The characters were completely underutilized, and Flash was just a joke. Once Superman arrives in the final battle, the tension is completely gone. I mean, just look at Steppenwolf's design!
I'm blind!
Steppenwolf is a terrible villain, and I can just keep going on and on about how awful this film is, but I won't waste your time anymore.
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
I will give Justice League the 25% that it deserves.
We're bad guys. It's what we do.
Suicide Squad is much better than Justice League, but it's still bad. The saving graces are Will Smith's Deadshot and Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, as they were entertaining and had a little bit of an arc. Diablo was fine, but really that's all the positives I can say. The story was incredibly messy, the villains were tremendously bland, and the action was forgettable. Ayer should have at least been able to complete his vision, so we could maybe have a decent movie, but the studio brought in the trailer editors, and it just ruined the film. WB has thankfully learned to let the director have some control, as they have with James Gunn in the Suicide Squad. This movie is just a mess and deserves 45% because of all the flaws it has. Wonder Woman 1984 is a big step down from the original. The more I thought about this movie, the worse it got. To be clear, I don't hate this movie. It has some good stuff, such as this being some of the best acting from Gal Gadot we ever got. Pedro Pascal just going nuts with his performance, making it tough to not be entertained by him. The score was pretty solid. It's a very grand movie, but I can't praise it anymore. The story to me is so cheesy, and I get that Jenkins wanted to pay homage to the OG Reeves Superman. The problem with that is that the tone of those movies doesn't work with the rest of the DCEU or even the first Wonder Woman. They barely took advantage of the 80s setting, as not much really popped other than that scene in the mall. Bringing back Steve Trevor I didn't like because they couldn't let a character stay dead, and it takes away from the best part of Wonder Woman's third act, which is Steve's sacrifice. The way they brought back Steve was a terrible idea, as Diana pretty much raped the man that Steve was inside, or his personality was inside. That is not very heroic, to say the least. Cheetah to me was just a weak villain, as they used the same trope for the villain from Iron Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 2, Batman Forever, and some other movies where the bad guy starts off as a fan of the hero, then goes bad because of the way the hero treated them. Anyways, that's enough said about 1984. This movie gets 51% from me, and as I said, I don't hate this movie. Birds of Prey and the obnoxiously long movie title is my next film, and from here on out I enjoy each movie. I like Birds of Prey. It's nowhere near great, but it's enjoyable. I'll start positively. The first half is great. The first half is much better than the second half, as it feels unique. It has its own flair that is kind of like Deadpool, but it's enough to be different. Margot Robbie really gets to shine here in Birds of Prey, as she gets to carry her own film, and she's the best part of it. The action in the first half is great, especially the prison break, which was choreographed by the same crew that did John Wick. Now there's the second half, which isn't bad, but it just felt uninspired. The final battle in the funhouse was pretty flat to me, as the choreography just lacked so much compared to the rest of the action. Funky storytelling was also missing in the second half. The other main problem is that this movie is Harley Quinn's movie and not the Birds of Prey movie. They have important roles, but they feel more like side characters. Also, how can you have Black Canary barely use her scream when that's her main power? Black Mask is a really good villain in the first half as he's terrifying but funny, and in the second half he just kind of becomes a generic bad guy played by an amazing actor. Birds of Prey will get 70% from me because it's still a good movie.
Yeah, still good.
For starters, whenever I talk about BVS, I will only be talking about the Ultimate Edition. The OG cut is okay at best, but I actually like the Ultimate Edition. It fleshes out more of Superman/Clark Kent, when the OG cut really only kind of fleshed out Batman. You see why these two would eventually fight because of their two different worldviews. Sure, Lex Luthor made them fight, but without him you can still tell they would have fought. I still don't like Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, simply because he didn't feel like Lex Luthor. The movie is also overstuffed with too much stuff to do, and if they did a Batman movie first, along with the Man of Steel 2, I think we could have had a real winner on our hands from the get-go. I have a video on my channel called How the DCEU Should Have Been Released, and I'll leave the link in the description. I still think Ben Affleck as Batman is great, and he's honestly my second favorite Batman behind Christian Bale. I also love Henry Cavill as Superman, and if you watch Wonder Woman before this, then Wonder Woman's role is actually much better utilized than it is without that movie. Also, the action is still great, the BVS fight is great, the final action scene with Doomsday is really good, and of course the warehouse fight is fantastic. I like Batman vs Superman more than most people, and I'll give it 79%. However, there is still one thing that brings the movie down.
Save Martha! Why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name.
I make you a promise. Martha won't die tonight.
We are now entering the territory of great movies, and I really think Wonder Woman is great. It's not perfect, but still great. My problems stem from the third act, and mainly the final battle. I feel like there could have been an important lesson of how you can't stop evil so easily, since it doesn't just stem from one guy. It would have made for something so powerful, but they didn't do that, and we just got a very CGI-heavy final battle with Ares. The battle itself was also not very interesting, as it just felt like CGI everywhere rather than interesting attacks from either character. Battles between two gods can work. Just look at Man of Steel. However, I thought just about everything else was great other than the villains. The first two acts were awesome, and this would be in the top 3 if the final act was as good as those two acts. Well, top 3 might be a bit much, but definitely higher. The relationship between Diane and Steve was perfect in this movie. The chemistry is spot on, and both are so likable. The first 2 acts are just awesome, and there are some great action sequences in there. The movie gets 81% from me because it's great, but it has some flaws. Aquaman is a super underrated movie. The DCEU is home to some huge disappointments, but also some really underrated gems, such as Aquaman. The action is awesome, the villains were really good, Momoa does a great job as the title character of Aquaman, the effects are stunning, there's just so much to like. The movie is super cheesy, but that's totally cool, as it works better for Aquaman than it does for Wonder Woman, as we just need to make the character of Aquaman fun, and not a joke anymore. The tone also fits with how the character was established in Justice League. I don't like Mera in the movie, and her chemistry with Arthur just didn't work for me, but Orm is a really good villain though, and he has really interesting motivations for why he would hate Arthur and the Surface. Black Manta is also a good secondary villain. This movie is just a blast from start to finish, and the all-out war at the end is awesome. James Wan is really becoming one of my favorite directors out there, and I love Aquaman. It'll get 91% from me just because of how much fun it is.
But you're welcome for not getting robbed! Oh, hey, what's up? I'm a superhero.
Shazam is just awesome. It really works better as a standalone movie than a movie in the DCEU, but I still love it. Zachary Levi is just so great at playing Shazam, and all of the acting in general is great. The action is the weak point, as it's nothing special, but not bad either. The movie isn't about the action, and that's totally fine. Savannah is an alright villain played by a great actor. Strong does really well in that role. The best thing about the movie is the heart. The movie is really heartfelt, and that's just an all-around feel-good movie. Whenever you watch Shazam, you will have a big grin on your face because of how much fun it is, and it does resonate with you emotionally. Shazam gets 91%. 。 The Suicide Squad was my most anticipated movie of 2021, and it absolutely delivered. I knew that Suicide Squad and James Gunn would mesh perfectly, and they did. Everything in this movie was better than in the first movie. The acting was awesome, the CGI was great, the movie has a unique flair, and it was just so good to watch. It was so good that I watched it twice in one day, granted both times were on HBO Max. Bloodsport is not just a ripoff of Deadshot, and in fact I like him more than Deadshot. Ratcatcher 2 and Bloodsport were really the heart of this movie, but King Shark was absolutely the standout for me. He was just perfect. On the first watch, I felt like the pacing could have been a bit better, but upon the second watch, the pacing was awesome. This movie is such an easy watch, but it's also very brutal, so the movie may not be for everyone. This is the best John Cena has ever been in any movie for me, and I even like Rick Flag in the movie, who I didn't care for at all in the first movie. James Gunn was even able to make Polka Dot Man awesome. There are tons of deaths in this movie, and you do feel bad for some of them, but others are just funny. This movie gets 95% for me, and I would love to see James Gunn do more DC stuff.
Bird.
The world wasn't ready. What do you think?
Man of Steel is maybe the most underrated comic book movie out there in my opinion. Cavill is so amazing as Superman, and he's definitely my favorite Superman. Zod, portrayed by Michael Shannon, is maybe my favorite DCEU villain, as he has good motivations and is a very good threat for Superman. This movie really is a character study for Clark Kent, and it's about how the real world would react to Superman, and it makes Jonathan a really interesting character because you can see why he would want Clark to keep his powers a secret. Then Zack Snyder's Justice League pays off this movie so well when Clark hears Jonathan's voice and how he supports him now, saying that the world is ready for him. The opening on Krypton is straight up one of the best openings to a movie I've ever seen. The first half is light on action, then the second half is just all action, which is weird pacing, but it works for me. This movie is 95% for me, and it gets better after every rewatch, so if you haven't seen Man of Steel, please watch it, and at least give it one more chance. This was a surprise. Not the placement, but how good Zack Snyder's Justice League really was. I was expecting around BVS Ultimate Edition quality, but this is top-tier comic book movie quality for me, at least. This is my favorite Zack Snyder movie, and it's just amazing. The action was great. I really felt the stakes in this movie. Steppenwolf was actually a good villain. Every character got much more to do, especially Flash and Cyborg, who were the highlights of the movie for me, and I just loved everything about this movie. Sure, the movie could have been trimmed down to 3.5 hours, but I had no problem with it being 4 hours. Yes, the epilogue stuff works better as post-credit scenes except for the first few minutes, but if you believe that, then turn off the movie after the first few minutes of the epilogue. It's not necessary to watch. When I watch the movie, I like to watch the whole thing because that's just how I roll, but I now stop after the first few minutes of the epilogue unless I want to watch it with someone who hasn't seen it before. When I first watched the epilogue, I loved it, but after rewatches, it takes a bit too long for me. Also, I did not like that Martha was Martian Manhunter in that one scene because it took away from a great scene. Other than that, I have no issues with the film, and the ones mentioned are minor in the grand scheme of things. I love every character. Silas Stone's sacrifice was honestly emotional, and
beautiful.
Superman coming back was so satisfying, and the score was absolutely incredible. One of my favorite movie scores, and I forgot to mention this, but Man of Steel also has an incredible score. How can I talk about this movie without bringing up Flash reversing time, which is one of my favorite scenes in any comic book movie, and the action in general is fantastic. I can't imagine how many people would have been blown away if we didn't know some of these plot points because of the theatrical cut, but this is my Justice League. Zack Snyder's Justice League gets 97% for me because this is how you do a Justice League movie. That's my ranking of the DCEU. Comment down below what your ranking is because I'd love to see some other opinions. Remember, this is my ranking, not the correct ranking because we all have different opinions. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Make sure to leave a like because it helps me out a lot, and subscribe if you want to see more of my content. So thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see everyone next time. Bye bye.